I spent the whole February using Odin 2 exclusively, and here is what happened. Hi guys, welcome to ETland, and today I want to talk about my 1-month challenge on using the Odin 2 exclusively. So if you have been following me for a while, you probably know that I didn't like the Odin 2 at all. Most of it because of the ergonomics that doesn't fit people with smaller hands, and for example, the travels of the triggers are too long and the D-pad is too soft and located too far away, so it is very difficult for people with shorter fingers to articulate and register the buttons. And with the rounded edges, the corners at the bottom, and the very prominent grips at the back, it makes it even harder for people with smaller hands to hold it. So I thought those are very obvious reasons to not like the Odin 2, but seems like the internet doesn't agree, and many people say that I've been setting up the Odin 2 wrong and I just don't understand how good it is. So I decided to look from a different perspective and to learn to see if I can appreciate it better. So of course, in order to let myself like it better, I started with messing with my Daijisho front end together with adding some bezels to the retro arch so that it looks a lot better. If you are interested in how to set up these things, you can go to my guides, and I have links in the description box to these two guides. And yes, after setting it up, the experience is a lot better. But how about ergonomics, which was the major problem I encountered? So before talking about that, I want to briefly talk about Switch emulation, because it is kind of related to the ergonomics problem that we want to talk about later. And it also echoes with my first review on Odin 2. So of course, in comparison to the very beginning of the launch of Odin 2, the Switch emulation performance has been improved a lot. For example, this Digimon game here was not working at the beginning, and now it runs at 60 FPS. In my first review, I mentioned that I don't think it is a good idea to buy this device for Switch emulation, although there were many people thinking so. And the reason was that it was still under development and there are just so many games cannot be played. And well, after seeing those improvements, I had a time that I thought I was wrong and I could expect more from Yuzu, but now turns out Yuzu is dead in March and we are just in a loop, and I still don't think it is a good idea if you are trying to buy an Odin 2 for Switch emulations. During February, there was a lot of updates released by Yuzu, and it really helps stabilizing those major games' performance. For example, this one runs very well. However, there are still many features missing. For example, you can't really use Amiibo key. Games that don't run just don't run. And it is just so hard to believe that there will be a breakthrough in the near future because of all those dramas happened recently. So yeah, even though I've tested 109 Switch games and used Odin 2 exclusively for a whole month, I still think the enjoyment of Switch emulation on Odin 2 is very limited. So how about streaming and cloud gaming, which are another part of modern gaming? And I have to emphasize that cloud gaming and streaming are two main functions that I would use on an Android handheld. And the footage that I'm showing you here is me trying to reconnect to my steamlink at home because the connection was too bad on the Odin 2 side and I was forced to disconnect from my PC. So let's do a Wi-Fi connection test to see how bad the reception of Wi-Fi signal it is on the Odin 2. So here is the test. It can't really finish in the middle. You see here, it stops and it says you're getting 20 megabytes. And I decided to do the test again, and I want to show you that I'm actually using Wi-Fi 6. Okay, here, Wi-Fi 6, and it is full signal. So when I run the network test again, this is just going to get 15 megabytes and it just stopped in the middle of the test. When you look at the spec of Odin 2, it supports Wi-Fi 7, but it just doesn't work that way on my unit. And I even did a comparison between my Odin 2 and my AYN Pocket Air to see if there's any differences in the connection to my steamlink, and here's the result. Okay, so you may have doubts in my Wi-Fi speed, and I actually did a Wi-Fi speed test comparison in my Retro Pocket 4 Pro first look video, and you can see that comparing to other devices using the same Wi-Fi, the Odin 2 is giving the worst result, and I just don't understand how and why it is like that. Either way, streaming on Odin 2 is a no-go for me. So how about cloud gaming? I would say it is very dependent on the cloud gaming server. For example, the footage that I'm showing you here, I just never got the chance to get onto the server, and sometimes because of the cloud gaming machine that they are using, no matter it is PC or Xbox, sometimes the connection from their side is not very good, and those are just factors that you can't control. But for the time that you can get a good connection from both sides, the gameplay could be quite smooth, so I would say the cloud gaming experience could be a hit and a miss. And I don't think this is a fair representation of its Wi-Fi by just testing the cloud gaming, because there are too many uncontrollable factors. Okay, now let's talk about the retro gaming experience on the Odin 2 from my perspective. So we all know that the Odin 2 is the most powerful Android handheld in the market right now, so there is no doubt that it is really powerful and it just plays everything up to 3DS and PS2. No doubt it is a good performing device, but if you look at the D-pad, it is located at the very lower parts of this device, and for people with smaller hands, we gotta grab the lower parts of this device in order to use this D-pad, and this is torturing. I don't know if you can really tell from this footage, but what I'm doing is bending my left wrist in order to reach the D-pad, especially when I have to press the left button. This game is still okay because it doesn't really require you to press the triggers and the L1 and R1 buttons, but if you are playing PSP games, that is a disaster. Okay, so let's use Taiko no Taijin as an example to tell you how much I'm really struggling when I play retro games. If you look at that, you can look at my left hand, which I have to reach the D-pad, and I really have to grab it from the bottom part because it is very difficult for me to access the D-pad, and then I really have to tilt my wrist to the left hand side in order to reach the D-pad. And you can see my finger is barely reaching the L1 button. So not to talk about the left trigger, I would definitely cannot reach the left trigger because of my fingers are being too short, and it is so difficult for me to hold a device like this because it is also a little bit heavier than other Android handhelds on the market. So most of the weight are going to go on my left hand because I have to tilt it to that angle, and that is actually hurting my wrist. And now I think it is a good time for me to talk about ergonomics, since I've already talking about during my retro gaming experience section. Over the past few months of my experience with Odin 2, I've learned that if I have to enjoy holding my Odin 2, I have to hold it as high as I'm showing in the footage. But if I have to hold it this high, I can only enjoy some modern gamings because it is very hard for me to reach the D-pad. So, if you remember what I've talked about modern gamings, most of the games that I'm playing are either Switch emulation, which most of the games are not going to work on Odin 2 as well, and because of the library of mine. And also, if you are talking about streaming, it is also very slow, just like what I've mentioned and showed you, and I'm not sure why that is happening. And the Wi-Fi speed is also very bad in comparison comparison to other devices while using the same Wi-Fi. So the only thing that I can do with it is Xbox Cloud Gaming, and just like I mentioned, Xbox Cloud Gaming is also a hit and a miss. It can go smooth like this sometimes, but sometimes it is going to be very laggy because of the server of Microsoft. And the last thing I can do with it is retro gaming, which, as I mentioned, it is also not very enjoyable because of the location of that D-pad and how the weight is going to burden your wrist because of how you are going to hold it with a smaller hand. So it seems like I've been talking a lot of bad things about this device, and so do I enjoy it? What is the good thing about this device? The first thing I really love about this device is that it comes, well, you can order a TPU case from their official site, which is actually very important because it is very protective and it is very useful in many cases. I mean, for other handhelds, you don't really get this kind of cases from their official site, and I think it is a really good idea to protect your device. Secondly, despite it is very difficult for me to play retro games, it really plays everything. And if you have a bigger hand that fits with this device, you can really play everything and without worrying whether it would play on this device or not, because it is going to play. But of course, if you are looking at like Switch emulations and stuff, it is a hit and miss for most of the time. Speaking of audio, this is going to be the best device amongst all the handhelds in the Android handheld market. I'm saying this because first of all, the speaker is very crispy and you can hear everything. The volume is also very good in terms of dynamics, so if you turn it down, it is still very clear. If you turn it up, it is loud enough for everyone to hear that. And because the speakers are located at the front, it is going to go directly into your ears. And if you compare it to Retro Pocket 4 Pro, sometimes you will see that if you are turning down the volume, it is not very audible, but it doesn't have those issues. And if you compare it to the AYN Pocket Air, it is also a lot clearer than that. And look at that screen. Even though it is not an OLED screen, it is very clear, vibrant in terms of color, and it is big. I mean, sometimes if you play streaming, you want to have a bigger screen because those are like computer games and it is not clear enough to look at a small screens. Well, despite the problem with the Wi-Fi, if it is working, it is very good. And I also think that this screen is big enough to be suitable to play DS games and 3DS games, because even though if you are having a larger screen on the left hand side, the smaller one will still be enough, like large enough for you to be visible and to touch it for any kind of touch control gamings. Last but not least, I want to talk about the battery life. I mean, this thing is a beast in terms of battery life. I can get like 8 hours of gameplay if I'm playing some retro games, and if I'm doing like Switch emulations, I probably get like 2 to 3 hours. And for streaming, I get like 4 to 5 hours, and if I'm putting it on sleep, basically about 2 weeks I can still have the device with battery on it. However, I also noticed that the recent OTA update made the battery drains a lot faster in sleep mode. In conclusion, do I like Odin 2? Not really. I mean, it is really hard for me to use it because of all the ergonomics problems, and it just doesn't fit anyone with smaller hands. It is a good device for people who have bigger hands and not aiming for streaming and Switch emulation. But if you are someone who have small hands and have similar use case as mine, you are really not going to enjoy it. I mean, I tried using it for a whole month, trying to appreciate it better and look in a different perspective, but it just doesn't fit me. And it doesn't make it a bad device, it's just not for everyone. Maybe I'm the only person that don't like the Odin 2, but I do hope that this video can give you more insights about this and to decide whether you want to get one or not. I waited 1 month to do this review because I want to know if I would miss it and I would change my mind, but no. And that's pretty much about this video. Thank you for watching it and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!